Hey, family. Wow. Today, Laurie Dowling is joining us. Laurie has been my friend for so many years. She's also been a shero to me. If you look Laurie up on Wikipedia, what you're going to find out is that not only is she the president of Dowling-Woo Company, but she's the executive director for the National Utilities Diversity Council, fondly called by me NUDC. Laurie grew up in North Carolina, and she grew up basically kind of poor, but the richness of her experience, her interest, and her contribution to the world is just, it's incredible. I can't talk enough about Laurie to encourage you about how good she is, but I know she can through the conversation we're about to have. Get ready, sit back, enjoy.
Joining us right now is one of America's most successful female entrepreneurs.
Special guest speaker today, the first African-American woman
to own a billion-dollar company. Her name is
Janice Bryant Howroyd. She's the founder and CEO of
Act One is one of the largest staffing companies in the United States.
She's now ranked by Forbes as second wealthiest self-made African-American woman in America, behind only Ms. Oprah Winfrey.
She spent almost 40 years helping others find work.
Janice, great to have you on the show.
wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Laurie.
Janice, good morning.
Oh my goodness, girl, what a morning it is. You have a beautiful day behind you. Tell me where you are.
I'm in Silver Lake in Los Angeles. It's a neighborhood just to the east of Hollywood and to the west of downtown.
Quit bragging.
You are looking at the tree behind me. That is a Chinese magnolia, a Michaelia alba tree that smells like glory when it blooms.
Yeah, you know, I grew up in North Carolina, and there was a huge magnolia. Well, I was a kid. It looked huge. I think it probably was. And it was in the center spot between the houses that my family occupied. We took the whole block up, and then the center was our big play yard, work yard, and all kinds of things happened there. And you're right, at special times it could smell so beautiful from that magnolia tree.
They are beautiful flowers, I will say that.
Well, girl, they aren't half as beautiful as you are. And you know what? I'm not just talking about how physically great you look. And, that's not a compliment so much as, a prayer of gratitude, because so many people are struggling right now in this COVID environment. You look so fresh and beautiful and healthy. But you're not just physically beautiful. You are spiritually so beautiful. How are you keeping yourself together during this season?
Oh my goodness, Janice, that is so kind of you to say. And we're just blessed because our family so far has been healthy, for which I'm so grateful. But part of the joy of being able to be in this time is you have a little more time for introspection. I don't know about you, but I haven't traveled since March for any time. And I know how you're always on the go. What are you traveling 1 week out of every, like 6 weeks out of every month, however many there are. But I, without being in an airport or on a plane, I seem to have a little bit more time to think about what's important. So I find that very helpful to me to just feel better about life,
What is important?
I think if I have learned anything this year, there are three things that are really important to me. One is family. I have not seen my family in real life since March. We see each other on Zoom, we see each other on Google Hangout, but we have not been in the same room, and we're a big family. Christmas time, we're like 30 plus, and this, so family is so important to me. I didn't realize, I work in diversity, as you know, and I've been working in this area for quite some time and with nonprofit organizations, but I did not realize how deeply ingrained to me the importance of equality and equity was until I saw it slipping away in our country. And I also didn't realize how important freedom was to me. Freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of practice, freedom to associate, freedom to vote was until I saw that also under siege. And so for me, this has really been a time to hunker down and do a lot of important, what I feel is important work to help address some. I don't know if you feel this way, Janice, but I was just doing my work and having my life. And suddenly I realized that I hadn't been paying enough attention to our government, to systems in our country, to avenues of equity. Even though I have worked in diversity and inclusion for 30 years, I hadn't been doing enough. And suddenly some of these things, the wheels are coming off. And to me, that has been a matter of great disappointment and almost shame that I haven't done enough in those years when I was just doing my work and doing my life. I haven't been as involved as I needed to be. And this year I have been involved in every way that I could be. And I just sort of feel like we took a lot of things for granted here, that all the systems would work and all of the things that were important, the healthcare, all of this stuff that we thought would just function. It's been held together to some extent by, paper clips and rubber bands, and we haven't put enough into them. So to me, I feel like we're going to come out of this time with a lot of work to do, and almost the same amount of work that our parents' generation had coming out of World War II. And I don't know if you feel that way, but I feel that in my heart very much.
Well, Laurie, there's so much in what you just said. Let me pull a few pieces of it out, because you and I share so much that oftentimes we could be the same voice speaking for each other. In this instance, that's not the case. And I think it's important because there are so many women who are family to me, as you are, who are experiencing as white women,
yes,
a whole nother iteration of their thought and emotion and work around social justice since those 8 minutes, 43 seconds.
Yes.
And I think they got even lengthened in post study. Now, growing up in the South, you've heard me say before, I started out colored.
Yeah.
Then I moved to Negro, then Black, then African American. Regardless of what they called me, my experience was the same.
Yes.
And so I left home with the consciousness and a person that has always been present in my engagements. Yeah. And that was a different experience than you had. So you and I have been aligned around the same things we want. In our person, we've come at it from different places. And the reason I say it's so incredible to hear you say, no, I've not done enough, is so incredible to me, because when I look at you, I've always seen you as more than enough. This lady never stops. She commits herself to supplier diversity, one of the most grinding gigs there that can exist for somebody. And, your own personal family is multicultural, and your spirit is so big and full. And you're sitting here saying, I feel shame. I've not done enough. That's a lot, Laurie. That's a lot.
I'm sorry, go ahead. So I guess, Janice, I feel like there's a whole generation of us who were politically active in our youth and are situationally politically active until now. But, you know, I haven't volunteered to serve on committees. I haven't, you know, I haven't done the day-to-day work that, quite frankly, I think an awful lot more of us probably needed to be doing all along. It's like going to the gym, right? If you use muscles every day, they are strong. But if you stop, the muscles stop working as well. And I feel—
And the ones you don't use suffer. I remember pre-COVID, Laurie, running through airports, rolling my carry-on. And my trainer's name is Laurie as well. And she's tiny and lovely like you are. And she would work me out so hard. And I'm like, how can all of that come out of that person? But one of the things Laurie taught me, she said, and she taught it, I don't know that I learned it well, but she said, you got to switch up the arms that are rolling that carry-on. Your right side is so empowered and your left side is getting weaker. I want you to practice rolling that carry-on through the airports with your left, because she defined it from her scientific approach to my left side being weaker, because with 3 weeks out of the month spent running back and forth through airports, I was basically giving my right arms and shoulder a workout that my left suffered for lack of. And I think you're kind of describing that in your experience of the muscles, where you were giving a lot to supply a diversity. The other side was suffering.
Yeah, no, I 100%. I think you're absolutely right. And I love that analogy of switching up. And I don't know about you, Janice, but I feel that the perfect storm, and I say that, you know, I guess in quotes, of these dual emergencies, multiple emergencies, where we have had this terrible pandemic, where we've had this recession that has been built from the pandemic, and then this reckoning around racial justice that, again, we've always known that this was a terrible problem, but I don't think we have accepted it or embraced it. You know, it's like ignoring an illness, you know.
Yeah, I think it was, I think we've already known it was there. We've always known it was there. It was hard to look at. And then all of a sudden we couldn't not see it. And the pandemic sent us all home. And so regardless of what we were looking at, we had to actively choose not to see it. And that was what was big and different.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, you know, one of the things that I occasionally, we work at NUDC with Gen Zers, you know, people who are in college and just out of college. And one of the things that I've got nieces and nephews who are in that age range. And one of the things that I love so very much about this generation is they are not afraid to say what they believe. And they're not afraid to live what they believe. And I am so thrilled to know that they are there, because I think they are holding us to a standard that we needed to be held to all along.
And they live what they believe. And our friends also live what they know, as do all of us. We have a responsibility to assure that they are well informed. That they know from truths and data that help them to inform their beliefs. And I was in a conversation earlier, Laurie, with someone you may know. I call him Professor James Laurie, who did incredible work at Tuck as an instructor to me in the early days of me building my business. And we were talking, and I was sharing with him, you know, and I've shared this publicly. You've maybe heard me say it, Laurie. For several years, when I first lived in LA, I would drive. Actually, I lived on Venice Beach on the water, and I would drive the boulevard and go to a place called Helm's Bakery. And etched in stone above the door, not on a placard painted, but etched in stone, were the words, "Those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it." We know that. and I visited Auschwitz. I know the importance of that. Many of our young friends and family, if they are lucky enough, have studied it in school. Many of the schools have stopped deep history classes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It champions us not to forget our history. There are a lot of our young friends and family who don't even know their history. There's nothing to forget. And so faced with the reality of their lives today, I think never before has there been a better opportunity for us to generationally connect and share from what we know toward where we go. What do you think about that?
I am so glad you mentioned that, Janice, because and you mentioned James Lowry, you know, who's also a great author. And his books are really excellent. I give them quite frequently. As you know, I give books as gifts, not infrequently, and yours is included. I have part of the Christmas gift for one of my colleagues is your new book. But one of the things I think can happen is that we forget the people who've come before, and we don't always honor them, you know. And I'm really happy that you were speaking of James and that you were highlighting his work. Another one of the great leaders in this area for us is my friend, the late Price Cobbs, Dr. Price Cobbs, who wrote with Dr. William Greer the very first major book about the experiences of African Americans in companies called Black Rage, and in Society in 1968. And one of the things that I think is incumbent upon all of us is to try to help make sure that the pioneers are listened to. And one of the projects that we're about to embark on for the organization that I know you through, one of the many organizations through which I know you, is the National Utilities Diversity Council. And we're a national nonprofit that conducts research and shares best practices to encourage diversity in utilities and communications. And
you don't just encourage it, you create it.
Well, we try, and we do that with leadership of people like you, quite frankly. One of the things that we're about to embark on is an oral history project of supplier diversity in the utility industry. And part of what caused us to do that, I talking about not using your muscles and being ashamed of not doing enough. I can't believe that I didn't think about doing this before. Part of what caused us to want to do it was the passing of Gwen Moore, and the realization that one treasure trove of experience around encouraging diversity was lost to us without ever having been interviewed in a deep way. And so that is tragic to me. I mean, we have lots of anecdotes and we've all heard Gwen speak about it, but getting Gwen on camera for a deep interview specifically about her experiences creating General Order 156 to encourage to really create a place where utility companies would measure diversity and report it to the Utility Commission was path-breaking, as you know. And because we didn't interview Gwen, I feel that we must gather all of the other oral histories from all of the other people who've been involved in this nationally and make it available to the coming generations. So, they can learn from that process, and so that means interviewing people like you, interviewing people like Timothy Allen Simon, Harold Williams from Maryland, and others. But when you talk about
the
history,
great Debbie Reed.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. A rock star in this area. Michael Peavy, all of these people, Stint Marshall, who may have the best job on the planet now. She's the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, maybe the best job for a basketball fan ever.
I mean, that list goes on and on. Joan Kerr, all of these people. One thing when you bring up Gwen, first, let me just retract to Professor Lowry's book, because, his book could be used as a primer for the country right now, as we're seeking at a federal level to look at how we progress along this line of social justice. He creates a platform of teaching for economic justice. And I think when there's economic justice, there's less of a threat to social justice. But you talked about Gwen Moore. Laurie, did I ever share with you that Gwen Moore is the reason I got certified?
No, tell me.
Girl, I was at my office. In those days, it was upstairs in a building I bought. I was so proud of buying buildings then. Now we're looking at what's happening with buildings, right? But I got some ideas about that. In any event, I was upstairs in my office, and my sister Sandy was working with me then. And she ran in and said, Gwen Moore wants to see you. And I was like, Gwen Moore, who? And she said, the Gwen Moore. Now, when I grew up, we used to read print media. And the print media that would come to my house oftentimes was Jet and Ebony magazine. Sure. And I'd read about Gwen in Jet magazine. I couldn't believe she was at my office. Let me quickly share with you that in so very few minutes, she made some of the most outstanding changes in my psyche that I've had over a lifetime. First of all, she dressed me up and down. She walked in literally and figuratively with her hands on her hips, you know when. And she said to me, Janice, Bryant, Howroyd, I need to talk to you. And I was like, whoa, okay, this isn't a friendly visit. She's not coming to ask me about chairing something or doing something. And she sat down, and in short of 5 minutes, she'd explained to me why I needed to get certified. I thought I was doing very well. We were booking over $10 million a year with a very high profit margin to it. And I didn't need to be interrupted by any of that government and all that stuff. And she explained to me the reality of the landscape for minority businesses and the obligation I had as a child from the South to get certified and lead the path for other businesses who were not positioned to get an opportunity such as I was. Wow, all these years later, I think about that one moment in my life when this lady, you're right. Anyway, you're one of those kind of people. You get people that way, Laurie.
Right back at you. I don't know. They used to say, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. And my guess is when she walked in your door, that was the moment when you needed to hear that.
And I kind of felt like those folks who, oh Lord, don't call me now. I know you're gonna want me to do your work, but let me still have fun right now. You know, I felt kind of like that when Gwen walked in. I know what you're saying is right, but girl, I'm profitable. I'm enjoying my life. I've forgiven myself a little bit for being Black. You know, I do all this stuff. And she was like, But you've seen so much that has been impactfully changed that it almost makes you thirsty for what you know can change. As I listened to you earlier around feeling shame. You said, I feel ashamed. Talk about that.
Well, you know, I think it's interesting, Janice. I'm also from North Carolina, as you know, from Charlotte, though, you know, which was the big city. When I was growing up,
Queen City.
Woohoo! When I was growing up, Charlotte had 250,000 people. I mean, imagine how tiny that is compared to what it is now. You know, the last time I was in Charlotte, I got lost 4 times. I couldn't find anything. But you know, coming up in the 60s and 70s, you know, I was very fortunate. I never knew we didn't have any money because, you know, like when you're a kid, you don't always know, you know, your parents don't tell you that you're not, you know, well off.
I thought we were rich, girl.
Yeah, we had, you know, we ate, you know, and you in those days, sort of like what I see in my neighborhood now, you know, the kids in my neighborhood play in the street all the time, you know, which is adorable. and they're almost all the same age. There's like a dozen of them, and they're all between, the ages of like 9 and 6, and they play, which is handy, right? How clever of their parents to all have children at the same time.
Right.
But we used to play together in the street, and it was a very sort of insular life, and I think part of that was because we didn't travel much, we didn't, our lives were small in a lot of ways. And then I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And around that time, I don't know if I ever told you this, both of my parents died when I was in my teens, and I was an only child. And so by the time I was 18, I was basically living on my own. But I was still very sheltered, because you don't really go out into the world. You go from one little box to another often, especially if you're a white child in the South, because you're protected in a way that you don't even realize, and so when I moved here to California 7 million years ago, first of all, I had lived in New York, and I had lived in other places. I'd gone to school in London, but California, I'd never been in any place that was like 60 miles by 60 miles. That was we're so odd for people not from here, because, distances for us are, like, imagine if you were in Manhattan and, somebody said, you want to go all the way over to Pennsylvania, that's sort of what we would be doing, right? On a daily basis, not infrequently. And so moving to a place like California was a revelation to me. I had never lived anywhere where, you had to get in your car and drive for an hour and a half to get to any, like that people would drive an hour and a half to go to work. I had no idea. But also, I had never lived anywhere where there was such astonishing diversity. When I moved here, we had 104 languages spoken in the Los Angeles Unified School District, and it was revelatory to me in a lot of wonderful ways. It also was an opportunity for me to start working in different areas of practice. Yeah, I came up in the theater. I was trained as a theater actress and then a theater manager. And I was only not an actress once I figured out all the people who were better than me weren't getting work. And I thought that was really important. But I lived my life in the arts in the early days. And it was only when I took a job with the Los Angeles Festival, which was in 1993, focusing on the arts of Africa and the Middle East as a direct outcome and response to the civil unrest after the beating of Rodney King, that I really got to spend a lot of time working directly with an astonishing variety of communities of color. And I got to get over some of I became more aware of of the bubble I had been living in, that I thought I didn't even have, right? I thought I would, not infrequently, we envision ourselves as other than we really are. We don't see the plastic box that we're, operating in, because we think we're much more evolved than that. And, to me, it wasn't until I got to work with Peter Sellers and the Los Angeles Festival and people like Marla Gibbs and just astonishing artists and others in this area, Luis Alfaro and others, that I realized that I had a lot of work to do personally, and that there was a way that I could be helpful, and so that has been a very interesting life experience for me. And I'm grateful for every, bit of it. I don't know if I've also told you, I think you probably know, I'm also disabled. And so that has been an interesting life experience for me. I was advocating for the Americans with Disabilities Act, never imagining that I would need it. and so that sort of, that intersection, people like to talk about intersectionality, but the intersection of moving from not realizing the privilege that you have to having it taken away in some instances, and then realizing that even if a tiny bit of your privilege is removed, you still have so much that you need to give to others. I'm trying to think of a way. It's like when you pass the microphone. You know, we don't need to have the microphone all the time. And you know, there's that saying, I don't know if you've ever heard it, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. I hate that saying so much I can hardly speak about it. Because you know what? That is still assuming that someone is giving you some power. And to be honest with you, if I'm going to be invited to the party, I want to be on the darn planning committee. Right? You know, I until and unless we get power that is shared among all of us and not bestowed by someone else to us, we don't really have equality or equity. We have something else. And I don't even know the word for it. I'm sure smarter people than I would come up with it. But so I feel that that's the work we have to do. And that's where, you know, that's where the muscles that we're not using as a society are. I think we have to think about how power is allocated and how it is shared, because bestowing it is colonial. It's like it's patriarchal. It's like, I don't know, I can't think of any other words for it. It's not appropriate. We have to share it. And so how do we create a society, and maybe America is the place where we could do it, maybe the United States is the place where this could happen. We create a society where we share power, and that's not taking away from one as much as it is sharing among. And so we have to rethink that concept. And I look at one of my nieces is on the transition team, actually. I'm so proud of her. I can hardly speak. And
we have an international family here. So you're talking about the transition team for Biden-Harris in the US?
Yes, I am. Thank you for reminding me. And I look at her and I look at her daughter, who is now 17 and is the most politically active young woman that I have ever met in my life. And I think maybe this group, these people who are, you know, Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Zers can help us as a nation. And then maybe as a global society, move beyond one power structure to a different one. Because we can't talk of freedom unless we're all willing to share power together. Because anything else is not freedom.
Laurie, when you went to school, did you have a civics class? Did you learn government through a civics class?
In high school, not so much. I went to a pretty poor high school in Charlotte, and in fact, in North Carolina, you will know this. You could almost always judge a high school by whether it has a good football team. You know, I think in the entirety of the time that I was in 3 years, this is how long ago it was. High school was 3 years. We won one football game. So we were not the kind of high school that won football games.
I don't know. Look, I don't know if that test is going to stand up that long, because from my own hometown, our high school has put a lot of professional ball players out there. And I mean, it's like we churn.
Sure. But did you only have the one high school?
I get your point, though.
But you only had the one high school then, right?
Well, when I was going to school, we had the black school on one side of Panola Street and the white school far on the other side. Today, the iterated school is one that is predominantly black, because we are an Edgecombe County community. Sure. And you know, Edgecombe County is, has a healthy black population. Let me correct that statement, because where it matters, has a large black population. but
Yeah.
facing some of the health challenges that so
Yeah, no
many
kidding.
Blacks do in the nation.
No
But
kidding.
to your point, you didn't have a civics class.
We didn't ever make it all the way through each year of the assigned curriculum in history. You know, I mean, like we would ever get, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but like by the time May or June or whenever it was happened, there would still be like, I don't think we ever even got past the beginning of the 20th century, right? You know, it's like, and then other things happened, right? We're like the last day of school, we're like, oh, we didn't get past, 1890, whoops. So no, but I did have a civics class at the University of North Carolina. There was a professor named Dr. Gerald Unks, who was this he was so popular. He was this incredibly sort of radical for the South guy who felt very strongly about teaching educational equity. And so I was fortunate enough to one year have a number that got me into Dr. Unks's class where we did do some civics work, which was fascinating to me. But I never got it in high school, not a bit of it.
Well, I had a lot of folks tell me on trips back home, this is years after I graduated high school, that they learned most of what they knew about how the government worked and how bills are made from Sesame Street.
There you go. And Schoolhouse Rock. Absolutely. How a bill becomes a law.
You know the song, right?
Uh-huh.
And we can sit here and we can laugh, but the whole point of that is that if you quest for a freedom that prescribes equity and power, then you also quest for a better educated society
Yes.
around how government works so that they can understand how government improves.
Yes. Yeah. My first job
I mean,
in
I'm taking it that you believe in government.
You think, I think it would be hard for me to be in the marital relationship that I'm in without believing in government.
Right.
My husband, of course, was the first Asian American city council member for the city of Los Angeles, serving 8 years and ran for mayor. Thank you for your endorsement of him back in the day. So yeah, I'm a big believer in government, and plus my parents grew up in the Depression. I was a very late baby, and so my parents got married in 1939, and so they were Roosevelt Democrats. They were FDR Democrats. My mother was part of a broken home. She was, it's interesting, Janice, she was there was a rash of things that happened during the Depression. Sometimes if you couldn't afford to care for your kids, you had to send them to an orphanage. I don't know if that's something that you would have ever heard of, but my grandmother had to send my mom to an orphanage for a certain number of years because she could not afford to care for her. And so my mother was very clear with me that without Franklin Delano Roosevelt, she would be dead. As a child, the programs of the New Deal saved my mother's life. And so I grew up believing in government as the part of the solution to help people go to the next place in their lives, and luckily for me, Franklin Roosevelt did exist. And so my mother did stay alive. And then ultimately I got to come, so I'm a big Franklin Roosevelt fan in a lot of ways myself, just from, personal, I don't know, selfishness, I suppose. But so yeah, I believe in government. I believe that government can help solve major problems. I think it can be the place that brings us together. You and I remember John Kennedy as president. I mean, it's my first memory of my mother cry. Only time I ever saw my mother cry was when John Kennedy was assassinated. I was tiny, and I was astonished that my mother was crying. And then, so I can remember those moments, of presidents who brought this country together, of the feeling that we were all a group on a shared mission. I don't remember the speeches. I've listened to them subsequently, but I do remember the feeling that an entire nation felt that they were to some extent united under a vision of a new generation and a torch passed.
And we all went to the moon when those men first stepped there.
We did.
Across the world.
We
all
did.
went to the moon together.
Well, and the idea of having a vision, a government with a vision. And I think when I look at the New Deal and I look at because I think we're going to need another one. I think we're going to need a WPA again. I believe that we're going to have to do a lot of things for government in the coming months to help people recover. But when I look at that vision, I look at the we will put a man on the moon in our, in this decade.
In our time.
When I look at the vision that Barack Obama, evinced for, in his running for the first term and in the things that he said, I think that government can be a powerful, I think it can be a safe haven for people who need help. I think it can be the organizer for many of the things that society needs to do. And I think it can be a powerful repositor of vision and shared vision. I think it can create those things. And I think that we see that in cities. I think Mayor Bradley used to do that here in Los Angeles, Tom Bradley. Before Tom Bradley, Los Angeles was a little backwater to some great extent. It was not an international city. That was his vision. I mean, can you imagine what Los Angeles would be if he had not been mayor? Listeners, this gentleman was the first African-American mayor, and so far the only African-American mayor in Los Angeles, and an icon in many ways, but he traveled the world to bring people to Los Angeles. And
Bradley International Airport.
That's right. You can see his statue right there when you come to visit us, and you should all come to visit us because Los Angeles is a wonderful place. But so I think government can give us a vision of what we can be, don't you?
Government can inspire and support innovation as well. I was thinking, Laurie, and I really want your thoughts on this. I was thinking early morning, I had to do a presentation, an international presentation for an organization I belong to, MSD UK, which is the Minority Supplier Development Council for the United Kingdom. It's about building minority business opportunity. And my Aunt Shaw leads that organization skillfully. I was accepting on behalf of so many companies, including some of my client companies and our organization, the honor that they bestowed on us by planting trees in our company's names.
Oh, lovely.
And, in my acceptance, I likened those saplings to minority businesses where you've got these young, strong saplings that are going to be planted and watered and honed and cared for and grow to give back for years and years and years of their fruit. And we were thinking on during that presentation this morning, I was thinking about, wow, here we are. I'm sitting here in California, LA, California, and yesterday in Coventry, United Kingdom, a 90-year-old woman took what the British call the first jab.
Yes.
The first vaccination against this horrible, horrible disease. And how do nations perform? How do nations build? Laurie, this is a thought I had this morning, early dark. We had, because of government research and funding, pharmaceuticals that were at the ready to regroup and develop a cure for a national pandemic causing virus. They developed that cure. We're crossing our fingers, it's working. They developed that cure that 90-year-old woman took the first injection of in short of 2020 for a disease that wasn't known in 2019 to exist, although we saw it coming.
Yeah.
That's That's humanity, that's history, and that's government at its best, because without the research, without the funding, these strong pharmaceuticals would not have been able to step up to the moment to help heal humanity. And so I do hear you when you plea for a government of foreign buy people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that those saplings, you know, it's not enough just to plant the saplings. You have to make sure that you're watering them and fertilizing them and attending to them, you know, and that's also, I think, where government can come in is, you know, when we look at entities like the Small Business Administration, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, these agencies can have the Department of Energy that you have been an ambassador for in the past. These agencies can have they can come in at what I sort of think of as almost the tipping point, that moment when a company or an entity needs attention and help. They can make a huge difference, an exponential difference in the health and longevity of those saplings, right? You know, because water needs to be applied at the right moment. And I think that I'm all for the free market, yay for the free market, but I think there's also a role for government to help support this, you know, because what we know about small business, well, first of all, small businesses created America throughout its history. You know, I mean, Hewlett-Packard was a small business when it started. Microsoft was a small business.
Well, I can go even further than that. How about the plantations of the South that built cotton?
Yes.
You know, that built a cotton industry. So
yes. But I think that what we know is that small businesses often grow to big businesses. And if they stay small or whether they get large, they are still having a major impact in the communities in which they are located. They're hiring local people, they're fueling local jobs, they're growing local economies. What's the downside to helping them? Like, those are some of the best investments we could make, you know, as a society, is, you know, helping grow businesses. And because what we know is that women businesses often hire women, African-American businesses often hire African-Americans, veteran-owned businesses often hire veterans. So we want to grow employment diversity. Well, let's grow businesses. You know, who's going to hire people except for businesses and entities, right? So I think that I think we have to think as a, you know, I think government can have an investment impact that is exponentially larger than the amount that it puts in.
Well, we saw that when we saw the banking crisis.
Yeah, it's true. Well, and we see it with you know, when you're talking about the pharma companies, you know, a lot of that work, that sort of stage one work, is actually done in universities and in teaching hospitals.
And in the national labs. Have you ever
Exactly.
visited one of our national labs?
Oh my God, I've been to Livermore, which is like the best place on the planet.
Lawrence Livermore, yes.
I
I've visited maybe 4 labs now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to go to Oak Ridge. My uncle worked at Oak Ridge during the war, and during World War II. And as I understand it, what happened was
you know what, Laurie, that's going to be a great story. And before you even tell it, maybe you need to back up and just talk about what the national labs do and how they exist.
Oh, thank you, Janice. As you're absolutely right. And because, you know, it's interesting. I'm pretty sure, and I don't know the history of the national labs as deeply as I want, but I'm pretty sure that they really started leading up to World War II and during World War II. That's when the U.S. started making investments in sort of, well, at the time it was military technology, but in science technology that was meant to be deep and permanent. And so
it was the original STEM effort: science, technology,
exactly.
engineering, and math.
You're absolutely right. And they started, I'm pretty sure that they started with 3 of them, right? They started with Oak Ridge, they started with Los Alamos, and then they started with one well, actually 4, because one would have been in Chicago. And
and I've been to the one in Chicago. One of the most outstanding things that exist around them, I'm sure you will agree, is that regardless of what's going on politically in the world, these are scientists, these are research people who are all working from all over the world, and they are non-political.
Well, and it's I have been as a visitor to the lab at Livermore, Lawrence Livermore. I used to live in Santa Fe, so I was very physically close to the Los Alamos lab, and so I would interact with people from Los Alamos. And you're right, it is all about the shared science vision and science language, and it's kind of a hoot to watch them, because they, speaking as a non-science person, they speak a language that I don't really understand, but I really love watching them speak about it. And there's an enthusiasm.
And think about it. I mean, Tesla came out of a lab. 3M picked up the accident when they were looking for how to develop a glue for airplanes, and it ended up being sticky notes. Just incredible, crazy stories that come out of these labs, as well as incredible healing opportunities. As you spoke about, some of the stage 1, stuff happens in these labs. You were going to tell us about your uncle with the relationship to it.
Oh, I was just going to say that, my mother's brother worked at Oak Ridge. He was in the Army, and he was one of thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers who were at the Oak Ridge plant during the World War II. And that was a secret Army base. And so what I understand from what my mom told me when she was living was that they would write postcards to their families, but they wouldn't, of course, be allowed to say anything about where they were. And then the postcards would be taken out and mailed from hundreds of miles away. So for the entirety of the time that the soldiers were at Oak Ridge, none of their families knew that they were there. In fact, nobody actually admitted that Oak Ridge existed, because it was such a super secret plan. And I believe that Los Alamos was the same. I mean, I think that people were not stationed there. They were in theory stationed somewhere else, and in order to keep those locations a secret. Can you imagine trying to do that today? I don't know if it would be possible with satellite technology.
If the world could find bin Laden, I think we could find a lab.
Exactly.
But when you think about this little girl growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and now you're living in California, in many ways, it's a quick journey because you're a young chick like me, but so much has happened in your lifetime, not just how you're informed, but basically how you live. I mean, you didn't grow up with a cell phone, neither did
really.
I. No, how you live. We seek, you and I, in a lot of the work we do, to create better opportunities and to right circumstances. What would you on your, I'm a fan of the T graph, right? What would be on your left side for what's wrong, and on your other left side for what's right with the world?
I'm going to start with what's right with the world.
Respecting where you are, Laurie.
Yeah. I'm going to say start about what's right with the world. And I think when I look at the last 30 years of my life, and I think about what the power structure in business, in society, in the arts where I came from looked like, it was monolithic in the extreme. And I look now, and not only is it not monolithic, we have a state that has made it a law that every corporate board must have not only women, but people of color on them. We've got the NASDAQ saying that is going to be a requirement for being listed on the exchange.
Did Did you see me on Times Square, Laurie? I was on Times Square with the NASDAQ. I'm working with the incredible mentorship program they have going on.
Oh my goodness. No,
How
I
awesome
didn't.
is that, Laurie?
That is so fabulous.
But please continue your
Yeah.
thought.
So I think that is a really wonderful thing. I think we have come a very long way in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, when you think about, it's been about 30 years that some of this change has been taking place. If you sort of look at the U.S. Corporate structure before that, that's that's hundreds of years when there wasn't that much changing. So, and I also think, in terms of good, that we've got leaders, especially leaders of color and women leaders who are and disabled leaders and LGBTQ leaders who are willing to stand up and say, this is what we expect, in a way that I can't even imagine, 100 years. So it's been 100 years that women have had the vote this year in the United States, a little bit longer in the UK. But 100 years since the 19th Amendment was ratified. Can you imagine Alice Paul or Lucy Burns or Ida Wells seeing that it would take 100 years to get to here? In one way, they would think, oh my God, that's too long a time. In another, if they looked at the amount of time, the 20 years that we've gone from 0 to 60, they would say, look how quickly it moved. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd just say it's too long. They were.
What matters to people happens.
Yes. Well, exactly.
That was the underneath of the Black Lives Matters movement. What matters to people happens.
Well, and I think it's also the critical mass of people who are willing to speak publicly about what matters to them, and that is a bravery. That's the only time things change, is when people are willing to speak publicly about what matters. And those are the courageous people. And so I think what's good about right this moment in the world and in the United States, we have courageous people who are speaking. And we also have, as irritating as it can be to have social media has made it possible for you to speak with people around the world in a way that you would never have been able to do before. I can read a tweet from Greta Thunberg today about what she's doing on climate change. Can you imagine 20 years ago, I wouldn't have ever been able to hear from her unless a major news organization covered her. So there's a disintermediation of some of the traditional forms of communication that has made it possible for us to be connected. The downside is that it also causes us to, share conspiracy theories and, yell at each other and look at cat memes.
Or some say even have the illness of disconnection. yes,
and then yell at each other, which is, not optimum. But so I think when I think about what's good, I think there are leaders of intent and energy and integrity that we see today that I think are heartening and wonderful. And I think also, I feel that we have a realization around urgency in some aspects of our lives that perhaps have been, covered over by inaction. So I'm thinking of climate change at this moment. How long have we had Earth Day? What is it, 50 years? We stopped using some of those muscles too. But luckily for us, from what I read, we still have the ability to change things and make an appreciable difference in our climate and in the health of our planet. I think so what's good is I think there's still time to do some of the things that we must do if we are willing to act and act with intent and energy. And as my mother would say, get a wiggle on. Or get our skates on. That's a heartening thing because, we could have left it too long. I don't think we've left it too long, but I think we have to get our act together. you know. So that's heartening. I think that what's not heartening to me is I worry about this. I worry about science denying science. You know, I think that's unhealthy. And I think that goes back to the same thing that you were talking about civics. You know, I'm not sure we're getting enough science in school either, you know. I also worry about selfishness. And that may come from national messaging. That may come from media images. I don't know. But I look at the number of people who can pass by on the street when there's someone living out rough, as our friends in the UK would say, sleeping rough, living without a home. Mm-hmm. I look at the people who can turn away from the image of George Floyd or the facts about the murder of Breonna Taylor, and who can turn away from that. That to me is selfishness, among other things. You know, it is selfish not to care about the plight of someone else. At least that's how I mean, that's what my mama would say. That's just plain selfish. You know, it's also cruel, it's mean, it's, you know, it's all this other stuff, but it's also ultimately, it's selfish not to care about the plight of the people who are sharing the planet with us. And I don't know how we got there completely. And I feel like so that's on the other side of the T. Well, that's to me.
Well, we talked about civics and, you know, the classes and et cetera, what we're teaching. Let's go back in history though. When you say it's selfish and we don't know how we got there, if you journey back in history, even pre-Roman, does it inform you on how we got where we are now?
Well, it's probably also human nature to care the most about the people in your closest circle. So yeah. And you know, when we look at, you know, sort of global history and certainly American history, you know, there have always been these places in our history. I'm thinking of the Gilded Age, you know, when you had so many people who were hungry, and then you had J.P. Morgan and Jay Gould and you know, what was Astor and people like that who were,
and the sun never set on the English Empire. Exactly.
And so, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's only been I don't know. Maybe it's only been in the last 100 years when we've had some national messaging around, you know, sort of civically caring for one another. Maybe
here's the thing though, Laurie. Maybe it's iteratively occurred as our science has allowed us to follow it, sometimes guide it. Because think about this. You talked earlier about social media, and you can find out what somebody's doing simply by you know, having that index finger work. Well, I remember opening the idea that nations have historically been built because we are tribes, right? People are tribal. Nations have historically been built pretty much based on geographical landmarks, right? And we contain ourselves within physical walls that we can build, whether you're talking about building one in the US or whether you're visiting those built by the Romans in the UK and or China. And now with technology, people are redefining their tribes. You talked about the glory of our Gen Xers and our families who've grown up on technology. Many of these young people have different experiences with each other, expect different outcomes from each other because they have the advantage of such ready information. Granted, they have to glean through the information to define, you know, fact from fiction. but they have it right there. I walked across town certain hours of the day to go to a library,
Yes.
to check out books, to be informed, because there was no television in the home and radio wasn't educating in that way.
Yeah.
And here today, I can pick this up and do like this and start a business, perform an operation.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that I can do that doesn't simply inform me, but allows me to be of value to humanity. So when you talk about how people change and how did we get here, it'll be really interesting for you and me to stay healthy, especially through this COVID, right? And see what happens next. We got a cure. We're crossing fingers in short of a year to a disease that didn't have a name 2 years ago, you know? And we've got technology in the hands of people who you admire, who are young and don't have the experience of tribes built on color, gender, or nor geography nor government. Their tribes are built on their common sense of purpose, ideals, and interest. And it'll be interesting to see what the human spirit does with that availability. What do you think?
Well, you know, I'm so glad that you said that, because I don't know, do you follow the young people from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School who created March for Our Lives? So I went to the first March for Our Lives here in Los Angeles. I didn't march because I can't do that very well since I became disabled, but I did take the Dalmatian and we went to the end. And they let you stay, you know, if you were disabled, they let you go. You didn't have to go through the whole march. You could just go to the end. And so I took Yuki, the Wonder Dog, our Dalmatian, and we stood at the end. And I looked at all of those kids. They were, what were they? They're not kids. They're young adults. It was 500,000 of them here in Los Angeles. And so since then, I've been following them. And one of the things that they sent out the other day is they're asking the Biden administration to create a cabinet level post for a Generation Z member so that their voices can be heard at the highest level of government. And can I just say, I love that idea so much I can hardly speak about it. Because, you know, think about it. That's exactly what we need. Of course, that's what we need. You know, if we were going to talk about, you know, who lives here and how do we make sure that power is truly shared, having somebody who's got a seat at the table to blow up ideas and really throw out, you know, their perspectives from their unique experiences, that's what we need to have. And first of all, I'm so proud that they're asking for it, you know, because I don't think when I was their age, I would have had the nerve to ask for that.
Would you have had the idea to ask for it?
I don't know. It would never have occurred to me, perhaps, that I could have a part of, you know, that kind of a conversation. So when you say that, I think that's, you know, that's part of the excitement too, is they're not afraid to ask for what they want. God bless them. And so I'm really interested to see if the Biden administration does this. I think it's inspired, you know. So I don't know how we got to that, but I just was really blown away by the fact that they're asking for it. I think it's really groovy.
Well, you know, I also see some evidence of tribe busting in the way companies are hiring today. Many of my clients historically hired from certain schools around certain characteristics. And today they are busting that wide open. And they're saying, not only are we going to hire from all four-year colleges, we are going to look at community colleges as well as a point of entry into corporate America, corporate organizations. So, you know, that simple cell phone visual that went around the world around social injustice has caused us to ask so many questions differently too. When you say these students can ask for a presence at the table. It's amazing. My mom used to sing a song, "Don't Worry, I Won't Sing It For You." That's not what I do. But it kind of went, "It is better to light one little candle than to stumble in the dark. Better far that we light one little candle. All it takes is a tiny spark. If we all say our prayer that the world will be free, the wonderful dawn of a new day we see. And if everybody lights just one little candle, what a bright world this will be."
That's wonderful.
You're lighting candles. You're lighting candles, Laurie. Those young kids are lighting candles. Those young adults are lighting candles. And I think it's incredible. I've been accused often of being Pollyanna. In this moment, you make me feel very much that person I say I'm not. The inspiration of your thought and your conversation around stuff. Talking about lighting candles, though, are you digging dirt? Are you planting gardens?
You know, we live on a hill, so we are not digging dirt in the literal sense. Our garden is pretty well dug, but in another sense, yes. And I'll tell you, but before we leave from this topic, there's one other thing I want to put on the good side and the bad side of my little T chart, and it's two sides of the same coin. You mentioned four-year colleges and companies getting more creative or more focused on looking outside of the sort of usual lane that they swim in with regards to recruitment. You know, we've talked about this before, but I want to bring up the minority serving institutions of our country, because in the United States, you know, we have over 1,000 minority serving institutions that
I'm representative of an HBCU, North Carolina A&T,
one of the best HBCUs and one of the best MSIs in the country, and flat out one of the best institutions of higher education in this country, especially from the engineering side and you know the STEM side.
To send you your other T-shirt, Laurie. You represent.
They're so great. But one of the things that I have found is that we have these amazing institutions. My husband worked at one for 10 years, Cal Poly Pomona, Hispanic Serving Institution here in California, that have been attended by recruiters, in my opinion, when, you know, in terms of the caliber of graduates that they're producing, with the level of knowledge and energy and creativity. They are truly an under-realized treasure for the United States. And about 2 years ago, the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine did a study specifically on the role of minority serving institutions as an underutilized resource in the U.S. And so on the one left side of my T chart, where I'm unhappy, it's that they're not being used as well and they're not being resourced as well as they should be. A few of them are large and they have, you know, great resources, but a lot of them are smaller and don't. Many of them are public institutions and don't have as many resources as they deserve. On the upside, there are two things. One, the caliber of the students that are coming out of those schools is platinum. Brilliant young people and great knowledge, great energy, ready to work, and often tremendous ability to multitask as well, because they often are working while going to school. So that gives them a leg up on how to be a good employee. The other upside is, as you say, now companies are starting to realize it. So if I could wave a magic wand, every company in the US would look at the MSIs in their area and they would make a commitment to recruiting there. For the National Utilities Diversity Council, we created, in order to help that move along, we actually created a guide to minority serving institutions that allows companies to go on our free toolkit, and type in look for the major field of study that you're looking for, the state, the kind of institution, and you can search and it will tell you how to recruit there, because we want to make it easy. But that to me is, and as you mentioned, they are MSIs are community colleges, they are career and technical institutions, as well as four-year degree granting schools. They're tribal colleges, they're women's colleges, they're historically Black colleges and universities, they're Asian serving institutions, and they're Hispanic serving institutions, and they are the best research source in
Cal
our
State
country.
San Bernardino.
Yes, Cal State Fullerton, Cal State Los Angeles, you bet. New Mexico State, Alcorn State, Jackson State. These are Meredith College.
Your incoming
Smith
VP
College.
is from an HBCU, Howard University.
Well, and her husband's from a Hispanic serving institution, Cal State Northridge.
Yeah,
That second family's got the MSIs locked in, man.
Yeah.
So I would just say that, if there was something that we can do as a country to move that forward, I in my other life, I'm on the board of an organization.
And that does not belong to political lines.
No.
That is totally nonpartisan.
It's nonpartisan, and it's again, what are the areas that if we're going to invest as a society that are going to yield the greatest returns? They are in creation of helping to create small businesses and educating our populace. That's, the returns fall from the sky when we do those things well. And in my other life, I'm on the board of an organization called Californians for Higher Education. And we're a nonprofit organization that was founded by Bruce Corwin, whom you know, among many others, Mel Levine and others. And we are about encouraging the state of California to put more resources into public colleges and universities and community colleges. So the Cal State system, University of California system, and the California Community College system. And we do that because we know that in our state, the state that we live in, will be better if there are more opportunities for people to be able to go to the California state schools. The Public Policy Institute of California did a study a couple of years ago that we were 1 million college graduates short as of this year of the number of college graduates needed to do work in California. Now that's changed a little bit because of the pandemic and all the layoffs. That has sadly, it has bought California a little more time. But we're not the only state in the country to be in this situation. We're just the one whose measurements that I'm aware of. So part of what we're advocating for as an organization is to encourage the state legislature and the governor to put more money into the California state university system and the other public institutions so that more kids can afford to go to college or go to career technical institutions and get their credentials or their degrees.
Yeah, because one of the things I learned about the community colleges is that typically the vast majority of its graduates stay in the local area, refueling the tax base, creating local jobs, and becoming tradespeople, which is one of the most honorable forms of entrepreneurship or independent contracting you can have. So, so there's a lot to rally there, even before we look at corporations hiring folks.
Well, and one of the most lucrative areas too. I've got two nephews who are who own their own heating and air conditioning business in North Carolina, which is like the best business on the planet as far as I can tell in terms of generating revenue, right? Because like, what do you need in the middle of summer in North Carolina? You need your air conditioner to work, It's very lucrative. It's a wonderful business, So going back just to the MSI thing, I think that, if I could wave my magic wand, the federal government and the state governments would put enough money into these institutions to make it easier for kids to go to college or go to CTE and to graduate. The economic reward is almost incalculable, as you say, every young person who goes to college or goes to technical education and completes and gets a job is lifting their whole community every single time they do it. Where's the downside? It's like, and so I just want to commend you for all the work that you have done on the President's Council on HBCUs in that way, because again, we know that a lot of the young people who go to college in a state stay in that state. Because they love it. Like, so a lot of the kids who come to California to go to college, they stay in California, whether they're from California or not, because they get hooked on, they get hooked on surfing, or they get hooked on the weather, or they get hooked on the redwoods. But those schools, the schools that these public institutions of higher education, make a big difference. So anyway, that would be the other thing I'd put on my T chart is our MSIs.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. Hey, look, Laurie, we got to do 4 for 4, right? So
yes, ma'am.
Here we go. Okay. First 4, you're having dinner. COVID is not the issue. Who do you invite to dinner and why? From any period of time, living or not right now.
Oh, well, I think mine would have to be a theater dinner, and I would invite William Shakespeare, though I suspect his table manners were not good. I think his communication would be sparkling. I would invite Lorraine Hansberry.
Is that why? Because of his conversation?
Why, yes.
Okay.
And just to get these people in the room, I would invite Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun and was the first African-American woman playwright to be on Broadway. I would invite my late
And she
friend,
was lovely to look at as well.
Oh my God, she was such a dish. I would invite my late friend, August Wilson,
Yes.
who is one of the great writers in the history of the world. And I would invite Tony Kushner.
I can
who wrote
hardly
Angels
wait
in
to
America.
tell Trish that you put August Wilson on your list for dinner. She'll want to come. She'll ask me to expand it to 5.
Janice, there's going to be an August Wilson stamp. In January, it will be coming out. January the 28th, there will be a stamp of August. Won't that be the most wonderful thing?
Oh my goodness. I haven't sent a letter in years. I wish it were coming in time to send Christmas cards. Not to worry, we'll send them anyway, just to say it's Christmas in January.
So audience watching, it's really important for you to know that there is a brand new production of an August Wilson play. It's a movie available to you. It's called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. It was the first play that August had done on Broadway. Wasn't the first play he wrote, but it was the first play he had success with. And it's starring Viola Davis and the amazing late Chadwick Boseman. And it is, you must not miss it. It's a brilliant piece of work.
Now, Laurie, did you get a sneak peek, or are we gonna kind of arrange to watch together virtually and we can share exclamations?
Oh, that would be the funnest. Let's do that. That would be the funnest.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go traditional with popcorn. And maybe I'll have tea, and I won't ask you what you're munching on. I'll get to see it.
There you go. Well, in honor of Ma Rainey, you'd have to have a Coca-Cola because that's a key part of the play.
Now I can't drink it, right?
You can just hold it up.
Okay.
So that would be my 4. That would be one of my 4. That would be that. And what would be exciting about that, Janice, would be to have 4. For many years, I worked as Lloyd Richards' assistant at the O'Neill Theater Center with the National Playwrights Conference, where we actually brought together all of these great playwrights to talk about their work. And I still read scripts for them right now. I'm right in the middle of reading scripts. I've got 5 more to do before the end of the week. But so having people like that, great playwrights in the same room, they're listening to them talk about their work and just to ideate together is really incredible. So that would be one of my 4s. What's my other criterion?
You got that, girl. You told why and you got your 4. So now here's your second. Okay. We're going 2 for 4 now. What books do you recommend to our family listening right now, and why?
Oh my goodness.
4 of them.
Okay. So we talked about it before, but I would recommend reading Black Rage. I reread it. I was going to do an NUDC book report on it. I reread it about 3 years ago, and I hadn't read it in a decade. And it was written in 1968 by
And how did
Price
that read
Cobbs.
feel different for you, Laura? Oh my
Sweet
God.
Matilda. It was, well, it's interesting. Price was still living then, and I sent him a note. We used to email occasionally, and I wrote him and I said, I'm rereading Black Rage, and Price is breaking my heart because it feels like this is exactly the same thing that you were writing about in 1968. And it was in 1918, in 2018, because I wanted to write about the 50th anniversary of the book. And he wrote me back and he said that he'd been thinking about that a lot. And he had actually been in communication with Bill Greer right before Bill passed, which was about 2 years before. And they were talking about how it seemed like it was a lot of the things that they had written about were coming back, and how distressing that was. So one would be Black Rage, because going back to those who cannot remember history are doomed to repeat it. I think it is really important to read this book.
I mean, my goodness, it's like Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On"
Yes.
album.
Yes. Yes,
I mean,
I've been listening to that so much.
Listen to that now, and I do say album, right? I mean,
yeah, I'm with you.
Was the vinyl? It was a 33 1/3, was it? Vinyl.
Yeah.
But when you listen to his messaging,
yeah. So Black Rage would be one. There's a book called La Nueva California, written by David Hayes Bautista, who is the founder of the Center for the Study of Latino Health and Culture at UCLA. And it talks about the growth of the Latino population in the United States. He's a demographer in his other life. And he also is a storyteller. So it's a brilliant book. And he just updated it this year because, in the time since he wrote it about 5 years ago, Latinos have become the majority population in Los Angeles, in California, and they have grown very significantly in the United States. So it's La Nueva California.
In our home state of North Carolina.
Yes, it's true, like 600% in since the last census. Well, I don't know what it'll be for this census because we don't have that data yet, but so that is, I think, an incredible and wonderful book. There's a brilliant book by someone who lives in North Carolina right now, Ella Bell, Professor Ella L.J. Edmondson Bell, and Stella Nkomo, and it's called Our Separate Ways, and it is about the difference in experience between white women and African American women in corporations. It is out of print right now because Harvard Business Publishing will not give them back. They won't reissue it, and they won't give Ella back her copyright. But we've actually got a petition going to try to get them to either do one or the other. We don't care. Just do something, because right now you have to buy it from a used bookstore, but it is and you can't get it online. It's not available online, like on Kindle or any of those. But that's a brilliant.
But if enough people start requesting it.
Yep. Well, and you may remember Ella because she also had a column in Essence magazine for many years. Ask Dr. Bell, So it's a brilliant book. And going back to a lot of things that we've talked about. So I would recommend that. And then there's a book that I am loving so much, and it is a fiction book for young audiences. It's called Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. And it's the story of a kid who goes to visit his grandparents in the South. He's from Chicago, and the walls between the worlds are a little bit unusual, and he gets sucked into a world that is filled with all of the great myths of African American diaspora. So Gum Baby, Papa Legbo, oh my God, it is John Henry. It is the world's greatest book. So I would say that those are my 4.
Oh, wow, Laurie. I know we're going to have people rushing to wherever they're getting their books from right now. I won't throw commercials out, but listen, Can we go 3 for 4?
Yes, ma'am.
You give me time to go.
Can I add one more?
Of course you may.
One more book that everybody should be reading is a book by Janice Bryant, Howroyd.
Okay.
Which is a brilliant story. So please don't forget that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to rush for those other 4. Laurie, 3 for 4 here. Actually, no, we're going 4 for 4 now. We did 3.
Okay.
4 for 4. What are the 4 pieces of advice you wish to give to our family listening right now that were given to you, and why? And by the way, if you have advice you give that wasn't given to you, we can tack that on to the 4.
Okay. Well, I think the thing that my mother used to say many times was that you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
I've heard that thought as well. It was expressed a little bit differently. You catch more flies with sugar than something else that I ain't gonna say right now.
Well, okay, yes. And I have found over the decades that is actually pretty handy, because very often my first response to something that is that I'm told would have been vinegar if I didn't think it through.
Oh, that's so Southern of us.
Yes, ma'am. So that's one. My father was a salesman, and he used to take me with him when I was little. So that was a hoot. It's sort of like Paper Moon, except not, and like, it's not like he took me to those kind of places, but he took me around. And I think he used to say to me, everybody that I meet is a friend is a friend I just haven't met yet. And so that is something that has served me well over the years, is to try to find a way to make sure that I can connect with everyone. It's going to be harder. We are, I think, more polarized as people than we used to be. And we are entrenched in many ways. We have to work with other people who aren't like us and don't even believe what we believe to accomplish things. And so that, everybody that I meet is a friend I haven't met yet. I guess I try to work with that whenever I possibly can. I'm not always successful at it, sadly. But that's on me. I had a boss, my first boss, when I worked in New York at the Juilliard School, used to talk about management by walking around. And we would have followed this man off a cliff gladly, because he made sure to go to all of us and listen. And so I would say, the idea of, that management by walking around comes from Bill Packard, of course, the founder of Hewlett Packard. And it's, really about making sure that you are careful with how you manage your hierarchy. And, if you don't know what everybody's doing, and if you're not talking to the people in your company, as you say, you do this so brilliantly, what's happening with your colleagues. And so I would say, so the whole idea of management by walking around, I think is something that is really truly important. And I'm grateful that my former boss, Ted Old, taught me to do that. And then I'd say that the last thing that I the last piece of advice I actually learned from my colleague Priya Nixon at NUDC. Priya is great. She lives in Napa Valley, which is a wonderful place, and it gives her a whole new appreciation for like the caliber of cheap wine. Like, she will not have, she doesn't do the $2 Chuck thing anymore, because at every party in Napa Valley, even if it's a potluck, even if it's like the city, wine tasting, the caliber of the wine is pretty off the charts. So she is now, a discerning
you
chooser
gotta
of wine.
You got to ask Priya for me, which non-alcoholic wine is the best for me to get.
I will ask her, and
She may say none, but then again, she may have an answer.
I'm sure that there are some people up there who are making it, so I'm sure she can do some outsourcing research for us. But one of the things that Priya has taught me is the importance of making sure that at every time you talk to somebody, the first thing that you do is check in on how they are.
Yes.
And I am so grateful to her for teaching me that and reminding me that every day.
Yeah, because it's easy to plunge right ahead.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it is. And today more than ever, I believe, Laurie, is a time when people actually want to invest the time to answer. You know,
Yes.
when I first came to LA, like you, 70 million years ago, I would have people say, hello, how are you? And I'd be about to answer and they keep walking. And it was just a greeting. It wasn't really an invitation to learn. And growing up in Tarboro, North Carolina, when people said, hello, how you doing, baby? They were waiting for an answer. And if you didn't answer, they wondered what was wrong with you, you know? And so it was a cultural change, not shift, for me to understand that how are you was a greeting. It wasn't a question. I think today it's becoming a question again. How are you?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's also about taking the time.
Investing the time.
Yes. I've got one more piece of advice that I'd like to just mention that I didn't make 4, but it would be 5. And that was a piece of advice that you probably also heard from a lady named B. Fitzpatrick, who founded American Women's Economic Development Corporation. And I remember her talking to women. Where I used to work there, and audience, Janice was the star graduate of AWED by miles. There are many brilliant women, but you win the prize. But B would always go around the room and she would ask women why they wanted to start their own businesses. And often some of the answers will be, I want to start my own business because I want to make my community better. And she would stop them and say, no, you want to start your own business to make money. Women too often forget to claim that they are allowed to make money.
Earn money. They make money, they go to jail. Earn money.
There you go. Earn money. And so I just remember, B's insistence that, because often women will, men too, but women will subjugate what we want and deserve to service. And B's point was, what you want and deserve, you should claim, and you can also do service. And so I would just go out.
We grew up with the saying, and many of our family are going to relate to it, that you can do well and do good at the same time.
Yep. So I would just say, the thing that B said, making money is earning money is not a bad thing.
Oh, you know what? We didn't do it. Our 4th.
Okay.
So we're going to do our 4 for 4 now.
Okay.
Since you're giving us such jewels. What are you listening to musically and why?
Well, Janice, I've discovered Spotify about 4 years ago. And I started using Spotify because I wanted, this is not even true. One of the friends of the National Utilities Diversity Council turned me on to Spotify so that we could make a playlist for our conference. We do an annual diversity conference that's very small. It's only 100 people, and it's about rolling up your sleeves and thinking deeply and actively about the issues of diversity that are keeping us up at night.
And it promotes so many businesses. I've really got to give you a plug here. It was at one such conference that an incredible female leader of a major utility stood up. And when she was asked how they achieved their numbers, she said, we achieve our numbers the same way we achieve our success. We hired the best suppliers. And she mentioned my company's name. And right after that session, I had several representatives from companies rush up to my team and me, and we gained 4 contracts from that.
Oh, marvelous. Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
glad to hear that.
Yeah, the
That's
power of word of
wonderful.
mouth, the power of word of mouth.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna call him out. The person so anyway, we created. I thought it would be fun to get people ready for coming to. I think at this point it was Philadelphia. Was to create a playlist of music about Philadelphia, right? So and my collaborator on this, or at least the reality check for it, is Maryland Public Service Commission Commissioner Obie Linton. Is a former DJ in his youth. And so he has very kindly listened to all of the playlists that we've done and made sure that we weren't missing anything. So anyway, I got turned on to Spotify. So now I make lists based on things that I'm feeling. And so I did one for the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote. So I did a women's playlist. I did one on the pain and joy of the pandemic, with music that was written about plagues or during plagues, or written as a way of coming out of a horrible historic event. And so I'm really into Spotify right now, and I make playlists. I made one on diverse women business owners. Like, so
Hear that playlist.
I'll send it to you. It's all diverse women who are composers or actually composers and performers. And so anyway, right now I just did one for the holidays. So I'm really into listening. I was just listening to Mahalia Jackson sing "Oh How a Rose, Lo How a Rose Are Blooming."
Yeah.
This morning. Just marvelous. So anyway, so I'm listening to a lot of holiday music, but I'm also listening to, there are a couple of artists that I didn't know that I have discovered recently through this whole Spotify adventure. One is a rapper called Madam Gandhi. She's about 18, maybe she's 19 now, and she is an Indian American rapper.
Heard about her. I heard about her.
She's fabulous. Oh my God, she's so great.
Oh, I'll go listen. I did hear about her, Laurie.
And then there's a woman named Shay Diamond who self-produced her first album. She's a trans woman who is writing some really interesting stuff. I'm listening to that. I have been listening to Mariah Carey a little bit.
Well, who doesn't at Christmas, right?
It's true. It's almost impossible not to. And I've really been listening a lot to Queen Latifah lately.
You're going back to the Queen.
Well, she's got a set of pipes on her. So
Wouldn't you love her to do a jazz concert for you?
Well, yeah, because she's got those great jazz albums and those great standard
Wouldn't you love
albums.
her to do a concert for you?
I would. Oh my God. That she's so versatile. I wish that she were allowed to sing more, to be honest with you. She's been so successful in her other life as an actress that I don't think we see her singing as often anymore. And I wish that she would sing more, because she has got a set of pipes on her like nobody's business. What are you listening to, Janice?
Hey, girl, I can't steal your thunder right here, but I'm definitely going to listen to what you've been listening to. I guarantee you before December 31st hits, I'll have incorporated your playlist into mine. I'm old school. I love gospel. I love classical. I'm not so informed, so I tend to listen to Chopin, and people tease me about it because they say that's not the best classical artist to listen to. But yeah, I'm listening to a lot. I am also what's on repeat a lot right now is Marvin Gaye. What's going on? Yeah. That's on repeat a lot for me right now. And then words without music always work, don't they? I mean, listening to poetry too. So it can go both ways. One of the best things that's happened so far this week, we're midway, is listening to you.
Oh, right back at you.
This has been so incredible, girl. We gotta hook up again. I have loved our time together. I adore you. You are one of the most generous spirits in the line in this world, and so informed. When you share, I know I'm listening from someone who has experienced, has studied, and has given. So you started our conversation today sharing the shame of not doing more. I have to close it with sharing gratitude for all you continue to do. I love you, Laurie. I love you.
I'm right back at you. And now you may want to cut this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Not everyone who achieves success makes sure that the door opens after they pass through it. And Janice Howroyd, you do more for more than anyone I know. No kidding.
Wow. Well, thank you, boo.
Right back at you.
Let's schedule our movie watching together, okay?
Hey, okay.
All right.
Bye, honey.
Love you.